Australia, renowned for its stunning natural landscapes, from the iconic Great Barrier Reef to the expansive outback, is confronting an escalating environmental crisis. Rising temperatures, prolonged droughts, devastating bushfires, and unprecedented floods have become increasingly frequent, signalling a nation in distress. Despite the mounting evidence and the clarion calls from the scientific community, Australia's political leaders have often been criticised for their inadequate response to climate change. This pattern of inaction and at times deliberate obstruction raises a pressing question. Why do Australia's leaders continue to sideline scientific evidence in addressing one of the most critical challenges of our time? Australia's engagement with climate policy has been marked by a series of ambitious promises followed by underwhelming actions. In November 1997, just months after assuming office, Prime Minister John Howard unveiled Safeguarding the Future, Australia's response to climate change, the nation's inaugural climate action plan. However, this plan, like many subsequent initiatives, fell short of delivering substantive change. Over the decades, political inertia and policy reversals have plagued Australia's climate strategy, leading to a legacy of unmet commitments and lost opportunities. The scientific consensus is unequivocal. Climate change is real, and human activities are its primary drivers. For Australia, the implications are particularly severe. The nation has witnessed a significant increase in average land and sea temperatures, altered rainfall patterns, heightened fire dangers, and rising sea levels. These changes have profound consequences for ecosystems, agriculture, water resources, and public health. The Great Barrier Reef, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, has suffered multiple mass coral bleaching events due to rising ocean temperatures. Farmers are battling more frequent and intense droughts, making it harder to sustain crops and livestock. Coastal cities, including Sydney and Melbourne, are facing increased risks of flooding as sea levels continue to rise. The impacts are no longer distant threats. They are happening now. Despite clear scientific evidence, Australia's political response has often been tepid, influenced by economic interests, particularly those tied to the fossil fuel industry. The nation's substantial coal and natural gas reserves have made it a leading exporter of these commodities, creating a complex dynamic where economic considerations frequently overshadow environmental imperatives. This economic entanglement has led to policy decisions that favour short-term financial gains over long-term environmental sustainability. Politicians have repeatedly used the argument of keeping jobs in coal and gas industries to justify slow climate action, despite the fact that renewable energy sectors offer massive employment opportunities. Fossil fuel companies continue to receive billions in subsidies, while renewable energy projects face bureaucratic hurdles. Public sentiment in Australia has increasingly favoured climate action, spurred by visible environmental changes and high-profile events like the 2.0192020 bushfires. That summer, now known as Black Summer, saw fires engulf millions of hectares of land, destroy thousands of homes, and kill or displace nearly 3 billion animals. The devastation was catastrophic, and many Australians began questioning why their government was not taking climate change more seriously. Grassroots movements, advocacy groups, and concerned citizens have mobilised to demand more robust climate policies. Schoolchildren, inspired by figures like Greta Thunberg, have taken to the streets in nationwide climate strikes, demanding accountability from leaders. These collective efforts have pressured political leaders to acknowledge the urgency of the climate crisis, though translating this acknowledgement into concrete action remains a challenge. On the global stage, Australia has made commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including pledges under the Paris Agreement. However, domestic policies have often lagged behind these international promises. The government's current strategies aim to reduce emissions by 43% below 25 levels by 2030 and achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Yet these targets are frequently criticised as insufficient and not aligned with the scale of action required to mitigate climate change effectively. While other developed nations are setting ambitious targets, Australia remains one of the few major economies still approving new coal mines. This contradiction between stated commitments and actual policies has led to international criticism, with Australia being labelled a climate laggard in multiple global forums. Media coverage and public discourse play pivotal roles in shaping perceptions of climate change. In Australia, media outlets have sometimes propagated skepticism or downplayed the severity of climate issues, contributing to public confusion and apathy. Some of the country's most influential news corporations have strong ties to fossil fuel interests, and this has resulted in misleading narratives about climate change. Misinformation campaigns, often funded by fossil fuel companies, have attempted to cast doubt on the scientific consensus, using tactics similar to those once employed by the tobacco industry. This dissemination of misinformation complicates efforts to build a unified, science-based response to the climate crisis. The economic ramifications of failing to address climate change are profound. Beyond the immediate costs associated with disaster response and recovery, there are long-term economic risks, including diminished agricultural yield, strained water resources, and increased healthcare expenditures. Australia's tourism industry, which relies heavily on natural wonders like the Great Barrier Reef and pristine beaches, faces significant threats as ecosystems degrade. The cost of rebuilding communities after disasters like bushfires and floods continues to skyrocket, placing enormous strain on government budgets. Conversely, investing in renewable energy and sustainable practices presents opportunities for economic growth and job creation. Countries leading the renewable energy revolution are seeing a boom in green jobs, while Australia risks falling behind. The disconnect between scientific evidence and policy action in Australia underscores the need for a paradigm shift. Policymakers must prioritise long-term environmental health over short-term economic interests, integrating scientific insights into the legislative process. This integration requires transparent communication, public engagement, and a commitment to evidence-based decision-making. The transition to renewable energy is not just a necessity, it is an opportunity. Australia has some of the highest solar energy potential in the world. It has vast wind resources. It has the ability to become a global leader in clean energy if the right policies are put in place. Countries like Germany, which once relied heavily on coal, have successfully transitioned towards renewables, proving that it is possible with political will. Australia stands at a crossroads. The nation's unparalleled natural beauty and biodiversity are at risk, and the window for effective action is narrowing. By embracing science, fostering political will, and mobilising collective action, Australia can confront the climate crisis head-on, ensuring a sustainable and resilient future for generations to come. The question remains, will its leaders act in time, or will history remember them as the ones who turned their backs on science and let Australia burn?